My name is Mervin, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's session. And with us today, we have our two speakers. We have Ms. Grace Yeoh from Rice Media, and we have Mr. Ken Chen from the Home Team Behavioral Sciences team as well. So first and foremost, this event is organized by SURE, which stands for Source, Understand, Research, and Evaluate. We're a team here at the National Library. We promote information literacy, and we teach the public, on how to discern information online, including combating fake news as well. So what SURE stands for, as I mentioned, Source, Understand, Research, and Evaluate. We look at sources of our information. We want to look at their origins. We want to know whether they are trustworthy. Understanding the information is reading about the information, searching for clarity. Then we have research. We want to investigate thoroughly before making a conclusion, and evaluating the information, finding the balance, before you decide to share, that piece of news that you receive over your WhatsApp or even in a social media, for example. So just a very short plug, we have a website. Feel free to check us out. It's nlb.gov.sg/sure. If you are interested, feel free to check it out. We have various free resources for the public, very colorful infographic pieces teaching you how to fact check using multiple sources. So all this is for free. If you do have more questions about our resources, feel free to approach us after the program today. Because obviously, we want to make sure that you have a good learning session today by our two speakers. So today, we have with us the first speaker of today. We have Ms. Grace Yeoh from Rice Media. Grace is currently the current affairs editor at Rice Media. And Rice Media is a digital magazine that combines storytelling as well as news reporting. She believes in the power of personal story to discuss public policy, to counter negative public sentiment, and shape the narrative around social issues. Now, along with editing, Grace also continues to write and especially enjoys working on in-depth profiles. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome Ms. Grace Yeoh from Rice Media. Grace, please.
Hi. First up, sorry for the offensive title, but I think the good thing is that if you are offended, this talk is definitely for you. Okay, my name is Grace, and as Mervin has said, I'm the current affairs editor at Rice Media. As someone who has always grown up around the internet, when I was invited to give this talk, I think my main problem was that trying to come up with terms that are a bit more layman to help you guys understand the importance of fake news or the importance of combating fake news, because to me it's very intuitive and it's very second nature to me that what is fake news to me when I see like a WhatsApp message or a fake website, for example. So I'm going to try my best to identify the different signs of fake news so that you can also help your fellow family members, your friends to understand how to pinpoint fake news in the future. Okay, so what is information literacy? I think when someone thinks of the term information literacy or media literacy, we immediately think of a very academically loaded term. So your mind instantly shuts down. Let me try to explain this term and break it down to you in the language that, say, your marketplace aunties and uncles can understand. So simply put, media or information literacy is a personal skill. So it's not something that is inborn. You can train it over time and over certain practices. You can build a habit. And it's also a skill that people use to assess and analyze information that's given to them. It could be the information presented to you from a blog, from an SMS that you receive, and even from, like, say, a newspaper article that your child or your parent cut for you and put on the dining table. That's also how you receive information. And what you do with this information essentially is how good your information literacy skill is. So are you going to pass it on? Do you think it's worthwhile? Why is it not worthwhile? Is it because something in the information stands out to you as being slightly off? Does the URL not make sense? For example, is it a gut instinct that tells you something is not right? So the media that we think about, usually we think about like TV, radio, traditional media, or even like social media. But for a lot of us, the main source of information comes from our direct messaging channels. So things that your parents send to you, things that your children send to you. And it's important to understand that when we talk about media, you must also consider WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook messages, Instagram direct messages, because these are the main channels that you would be most susceptible to receiving fake news from, since these are the channels in which your trusted loved ones send you information. These are some examples of content that you might forward to or receive from your contacts, and because they're very bite-sized, they're understandable and relatively humorous, so they are the kinds of content that will go viral. And fake news sometimes takes on a certain these kinds of elements as well. What spreads is essentially anything that taps into a part of culture that's intrinsic to Singaporeans. So for fake news, maybe it could be a certain dissatisfaction with the government, or it could be a certain thing about the government, or certain thing about a certain publication or agency that Singaporeans in general all feel at the same time. This is also examples of things that you might receive via your family WhatsApp group chats and all that. These are not necessarily fake news because they are not exactly fake and they're not harmful either. It's just that the information can tend to be a bit broad and very general. So why should you care? I think if any of the previous slides resonated with you in some way, you might think, okay, maybe I'm just one person, it's just one SMS that I'm going to forward, it's just one article that I'm going to believe, right? Why should you care? Let's not talk about the bigger picture first, let's just talk about how it's relevant to your own personal lives. Okay, first of all, try to recall any instance in, say, schooling days when you were asked to speak up in class, or even at work in the meeting room, when you were asked to speak up in a meeting room and you said something that was very stupid, or that something that wasn't right, and you felt instantly embarrassed because you had not done your research yet before you were asked to speak up. So I think one of the ways that we can prevent spreading fake news is to remember how it feels to be embarrassed. Not that I want to shame you into not sharing anything at all, but I think it's a basic human instinct to not want to appear foolish in front of someone else. Yeah. It's not just enough, though, to not appear foolish, but I think it's also important to want to be smart. So if you just remain with not wanting to appear stupid, you're not going to, say, do your due diligence and fact-check the information or the SMS or the WhatsApp texts that are sent to you. I'm not saying that you cannot forward these information or these WhatsApp texts after that, but I think it's good to do your own research first and then look at other sources, speak to other people, and if you're convinced it's true, then sure, go ahead and forward it. No one can stop you, but at least you do it knowing that you have done your own research about its validity and its accuracy. Now onto the bigger picture, I think deliberate misinformation hurts everyone. It doesn't just hurt, say, the person who receives it or the person who sends it, but also it kind of creates distrust and discord among society. Because what these bad players want to pass on is not necessarily the false news, but they do want to pass on discord and distrust. So how exactly can we tell what is fake? There are some signs, of course. It's not exhaustive because technology is always evolving. But I will show you some very typical examples of fake news that we've all received via WhatsApp group chats and so on. The screenshot on the left, the one with the text, I don't know if you can see it properly, but there are various phrases that are bolded and also some that are capitalized. So for example, good morning, embedded deeply, locks up. And these phrases that are emphasized make no sense whatsoever. There's no reason whatsoever why it should be emphasized. So that's one of the signs that you can tell that it's fake news, when it's nonsensical formatting of text. And the image on the right, the one with former MP Inderjit Singh, as you can tell, design and aesthetics come into play quite a bit with fake news of messages that are forwarded that are fake. So for this one, the fonts are all over the place, the screenshots are badly put together, the colors are just not very professional looking, and so that's why you can consider it fake news, or you would at least take a bit of caution before you forward stuff like that. The one on the left as well, it's clearly fake news because the URL for the Emirates website is not even a proper URL. It's emirates.com/free.com. And also no airline would have such a complicated URL. The screenshot on the right is a typical, I guess one of those health warning kind of WhatsApp messages. This is definitely fake news. The first sign is already in the first line, where there are 5 V's in front of very important. The multiple exclamation marks in the third paragraph, as well as the double periods in the second last paragraph. Not to mention that the entire news is just very absurd. So how do you combat against these deliberate fake news that are being spread? First, you check your biases. I think we all have preconceived notions about people, about agencies, about the government. So for example, just think of how maybe if you know someone in your social circle who is very gossipy, always likes to gossip, and they tell you a certain information, would you believe that person, or would you believe someone who is a trusted source, a loved one, very close to you, who also tells you the same piece of information? You would likely trust the second person, and that's only because your impression of the first person is already colored. But that doesn't mean that that person, whatever that person is saying, is wrong. It just means that you have a preconceived existing idea of that person, and it's always good to be aware of that idea. Second, cross-check sources. So for example, if I am going to tell you that, say, Bras Basah is a red-hot dengue zone, are you going to believe me, or are you going to believe, say, the NEA website? The answer is the NEA website. Please don't believe me when I say that. Next, you have to find the motive. So why is someone forwarding you the information? Is it because they have a certain grudge against that government, against a certain travel company, against a certain country? Do they have a bad experience with this particular country's ethnicities, for example? And when you forward some information, it's not just important to understand the information or to do research on the information, but to understand the sender's worldview as well, because the sender's perspective on the world also colors the type of information that they would think is important to forward. Trust your gut. I think instinct and intuition can be built over time. It's not something that's inborn for sure. If you feel that a piece of news is a bit wrong or a bit off, don't just brush it off as, okay, it's wrong, and I'm not going to question why. Always ask yourself, why do I think it's wrong? Is it because of a certain font, or is it because certain information that I know is correct is not inside that text or that information that was spread to you? And also, even if the message tells the truth, it might not be the whole truth. So someone could say something in, say, 2009, and it could be true, the person did say that thing, but if the information is spread to you without, say, the apology that was made in 2015, only with the information that was said in 2009, then that is not exactly the full truth, even though what was said in 2009 was actually said. Yeah. Question everything. I think this is the most important and relevant skill that I can give to you as a journalist. It's not just important to ask questions, but also to ask the right questions. So for example, you have to figure out what everyone is saying first, which means what the national conversation is about, what is the existing narrative, is there anything in the existing narrative that isn't covered, why is it not covered? And speaking as a journalist, I'm going to tell you certain ways that we fact-checked our information in the office. Number one, we vet all sources. So for example, if someone comes to us with an allegation about a public figure, for example, and we know that it's going to potentially ruin this person's reputation, then we will ask ourselves, okay, why does this person want to do this? Why right now? Why this particular story? Why us? What is their relationship with this particular public figure or person that they have an allegation against? Are they still on talking terms, and so on? And we also fact-check their answers. So for example, if someone comes to us with an allegation that's potentially defamatory, we will of course check it against the person who they are alleging this misdemeanor against. And before we actually publish anything, we will actually do our due diligence and ask the person, okay, do you have a comment, whether it's a person or an agency or a company that has been maligned by the allegation? And if they don't respond, or if they choose to acknowledge it but not leave a comment, those are things that we will state in the article as well, or in the video. Present the truth. Okay, I don't think personally, this is from a personal point of view, I don't think it's necessarily good to censor what is fake, because I think that sets a dangerous precedent. Because if you only present what is true, then someone might not know how you arrive at that truth. So for example, if we have an interviewee who says something very defamatory about the government, we can present the interviewee's answers alongside telling the reader how we did our own research, and we present the truth alongside whatever the interviewee has said. So in that way, people know what the falsehoods are, what the truth is, and how we arrived at the truth. And I think the process of arriving at the truth is actually more important than what the final truth is itself. Okay, so this is something that I have to cover because I think it's still a prevalent problem. And for those of you who are parents, you can ask your children to, keep you in check, or you can even do it to your own parents. A couple of years ago, I wrote an article. This was still in Rice's early days, but I think it did considerably well, which kind of shows how significant this phenomenon is. So it's very ironic because when we were growing up, our parents were the ones who told us, okay, not to trust strangers on the internet, not to trust anything that you read, and so on. And yet, our parents are still the ones who send us these information that can be fake news. It's quite ironic, but it's quite funny as well. Okay, number one, we can show them what constitutes fake news. So like my previous examples have shown, you just have to point out the signs to tell them, okay, don't just tell them, okay, this is fake. Don't forward this thing. Then they will wonder why. Why is it fake? Why do you think this is fake? So tell them the signs like, okay, because of a certain way that this is phrased, it's not correct, and so on. I think it's also important to show them what is the truth. So if you only tell them what is fake and you don't show them the truth, for example, maybe it could be a Starbucks voucher. And then if Starbucks has come up with a clarification, show them the clarification as well. Because if you only present half the story, then they're only going to remember what is wrong, but they don't know what is right, you see. Yeah, and so that is, it's one side of the picture, and they're not going to remember the lesson for life. Okay, thirdly, teach them, educate them. I think a lot of the older generation, not to generalize, just from my casual observation, is that mean world syndrome is very real. So this happens when you think that the whole world is out to get you or to harm you, and everything is inherently bad, or that when you drink leftover water in the fridge or in the car, you're going to get some kind of cancer whatsoever. And of course, the fail-safe method to combat these fears is always to forward any information that could potentially protect you, right? But I think, unfortunately, in this day and age of fake news, it's possible to spread something that might fuel the fire even more. So I think let's just revise the phrase, better safe than sorry. It's better smart than sorry. And I think, finally, the most important thing with dealing with parents is to be patient, or dealing with the older generation, or dealing with people who are not digital natives. There are even millennials who are not digital natives and who just don't understand the concept of fake news or how dangerous it can be. I think the important thing is to be patient, understand that it's not a one-time process. Doesn't mean that there's a checklist for fake news. Means that once you tell your parents or your kids about what constitutes fake news, means that they'll instantly remember it, they will internalize it. No, it's not that way. You have to constantly tell them, constantly be patient with them, tell them, okay, show them examples of what is and isn't fake news. And yeah, that's not to say that being patient is patronizing. I think it's just to keep an open mind and to understand that everyone approaches information from their own perspective, and it's already colored by their own worldview. Okay, so that's all I have for today. If you want to ask me any questions about this talk, or anything about Rice, in fact, feel free to email me at my email address is there. Thank you very much for being so patient to come down on a Saturday at 10 a.m. to listen to me talk about fake news. I have no idea why, but I'm very grateful that you're here nonetheless. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. So yes, indeed, a very interesting perspective. We have listened to some of the guidelines, all right, on how to fact check, for example, and as well as Grace's tips, from her perspective as a journalist. Now, if we want to we want to learn about the behavioral and psychological reasons behind why people spread fake news. Our second speaker, who's coming up, Mr. Ken Chen, a research analyst from our home team behavioral science unit. So Ken has researched the psychological factors driving the spread of information during situations of high uncertainty, such as scares and during conflicts. He has also presented on a variety of topics such as fake news and resilience to terror attacks to home team officers, community leaders, and home team psychologists. His current research interests include online misinformation, social resilience, individual crisis preparedness, and natural language processing. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Ken Chen.
Thank you, Mervyn, for that very kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very glad to see a lot of different people of different ages here with us. And my seminar topic is Defense Against the Dark Arts of Fake News. What tips we have from the behavioral sciences. Unfortunately, we won't be doing any wand waving or incantations in this seminar, but what instead I will do is to share with you some of the research that we see in the behavioral sciences field with regards to this topic of fake news. So now I'd like to share with you some tips from the behavioral sciences. So these are 4 tips. Number 1 is keep your emotions in check. Number 2 is check your judgment for biases. And number 3 is to check your sources for any problems. And finally is counter fake news by acting against it. So I'll go on to the first one, which is to keep your emotions in check. So why is this important? It's because emotions can actually affect the way people make decisions and can sometimes bypass your logical thinking. So what we find is that when there's content that has a lot of strong emotions, then it's actually likely to go viral easily. The second thing is we realize is that what we see in the literature is that when people are in very emotional states, they are afraid, they are angry, they are more likely to fall for fake news. So to illustrate my point, I will be showing you this video about the importance of being calm and fact check. Yeah. Okay, so as you can see from this video, this is a very real thing. So it's why it's very important for you to check your emotions. If you're feeling very angry, really should just stop first. So this is where we have a couple of tips. Number 1 is wait until you are calm. Based on the research, we see that actually emotions they go back to your baseline over time. That means you'll calm down over time. So it takes around 10 to 60 minutes. Of course, some people say I have held a grudge for years and years and years, and I will never forgive that guy. Yeah, but I think the thing is when you're under such high intensity states, right, you should actually slow down, wait a bit until you're calm. Then you can maybe it won't interfere with your decision making as much. And number 2 is one of the things we see is that it's important to be mindful about what other people around you are experiencing. This is because actually we see that emotions can actually spread from person to person. And one of the things they found is that when Twitter users, they were exposed to negative tweets, they were more likely to post more negative tweets. So that's why it's important that when you realize, hey, everyone around you is let's say you're online and you see a lot of negative comments, you should actually take a step back and think, okay, maybe this is, you might easily get affected by these kind of emotions if you stay around too long, and you might actually fall for fake news as a result. So that's why be mindful about what other emotions people are experiencing. Okay, the next is to check your judgment for biases. So what are biases? Essentially, biases happens when people rely on mental shortcuts because there's a lot of information to process, and they like to prefer information in bite sizes. And they make, when you rely on these biases, they actually can make judgments very quickly, which tend not to be very accurate. So I like to use this analogy. It's like you put a mouse in a maze, but instead of navigating the maze like the mouse is supposed to do, the mouse instead go and just chong through everything and just go straight for the maze. So that's something like how a biases is. Instead of thinking through a topic properly, you just bash through and just quickly jump to a conclusion. Okay, so I'll cover 2 biases. The first is confirmation bias. So it refers to a kind of bias where you you favor the information that confirms what you believe in. And why does it work is that people are motivated to avoid information that challenges their belief because it's uncomfortable to hold 2 different beliefs. So one example of this, right, is when people were asked to, people who are in the pro-death penalty camp and the anti-death penalty camp, they were given evidence to support their views or not. And they found that people who were pro-death penalty, they read the pro-death penalty argument, they say, okay, I now believe even more strongly. This is confirmation bias at work. Then people who are anti-death penalty, they read the anti-death penalty information, they say, okay, this confirms my belief even more. And they become more confirmed in their beliefs. That's confirmation bias at work. Okay, the second thing is the bandwagon effect. It's just simply like what my parents would usually say, you jump, everyone jump, that kind of thing. So essentially, you are doing what everybody else is doing because everybody else is doing it. And how does it stem about? Is because you think that actually the majority choice is a safe choice, and we see it in online behavior is when people think, oh, there's a lot of tweets, there's a lot of retweets, likes, then it must show that the article is accurate. This may not be the truth because there have been cases where we know that some bad actors, they have a lot of fake accounts, then they use the fake accounts to all like that one post itself so that you can appear to be very well liked and very popular. Second thing I think also pertains to us is fear of missing out or fear of falling behind a group. So essentially is people say, oh no, I need to send this information ASAP. If not, it will be like I'm missing out or I won't be the first to share with everyone. So this is a kind of recklessness that emerges when people want to show to people around them that, hey, I'm up to date with the latest news, so you should listen more. So it's reckless, and then it also drives them to share information without checking it. So do be aware of the bandwagon effect. So these are things you can do. Number one, read from a wide range of sources. Why that works is also because when you read a lot of different sources, actually along the way you may pick up information that you may never pick up if you just read only one source. Secondly, I think it pertains to what we see a lot is really, the problem is not that we are not reading or we are very biased, but it's actually we need to really just read and slow down and read what we are doing first. So we read the information first, don't share it just because we see the headline like very, very glamorous. It's like, oh, there is I say there's a terror attack, then you see the headline, then you jump and say, you must forward to everyone. That's not how you should do it. You should actually take your time to read it slowly and then before you forward it. And number two is actually very important because you see all these kind of fake WhatsApp messages, they'll say, forward it to the people who you care about. That is usually a sign that it's actually a fake message. And finally is, actually it's just to aim to be as accurate as possible even though you feel very uncomfortable. So essentially just asking yourself one question, will you change your mind if you receive a different evidence? If you say no, then you have to think about, okay, why wouldn't you change your mind? Okay, next thing is about checking your sources for problems. So one of the things we do see is that belief in fake news occur due to trusting in low quality sources or missing out signs that the information is actually being tampered with. So first and foremost is how do we check if something is a low quality source? One thing you can do is just check with other sources, see what other sources say about this source. So I'll just run you through this process called lateral reading. Essentially is you see the About Us section, you check whether they have any biases in terms of their donors, in terms of their leadership team, or maybe they have a particular ideology that they want to push. Secondly, you just look around, see what other sources say about this source. Then finally, you evaluate whether is this a reliable or is it a low quality source. So essentially, it's quite similar to the SURE model that was being talked about earlier. So it's also a very good way to do your research. So just remember just to be sure. Okay, so next up, I'll do a little bit of activity with everyone. So everyone awake? Okay, good. So I want to get everyone to do this little activity about trying to see which one you think is fake, which one is real. So there's two pictures of a ICA website. One of them is fake, one of them is real. So I'll flash out one, and I'll flash out A and B lah, so you can see for yourself. So this is A. Okay, next, okay, this is B. Okay, so can you tell what is fake? Does anyone say A? So a little bit of show of hands. A is fake, okay. Anyone say thinks that B is fake? Okay. So the correct answer is A is fake. Why is that show is because they have altered the URL in a very strange way to make it look like it's official, but actually it is not. The real one is the other one. So this is how you can check things. You can check for common red flags such as they don't have any authorship. That means you can also tell if they are using a fake name. That's how you know if this source is bad. The other thing is, like I said earlier, is actually URLs that look very similar. So fake websites, they like to use URLs that look much like the real ones lah. So in this case, this was what they found in ABC News. So essentially this one, they found that they use the URL called abcnews.com.co. So it's very ingenious way of tricking people into thinking this is the actual ABC website. So this is a very common trick that fake news creators like to use. They like to add a lot of strange domain names after the .com. Or even sometimes they just add a lot more words after .com, then finally end with another .com. So these are the ways, if you examine the URL, you should be able to pick up that this is actually a sign that this might be a very untrustworthy site. Okay, another common red flag is recycled images. So this is an example that happened in Singapore. This is a halal pork hoax that happened in 2007 and again in 2014. So what actually happened is that there was this image running around claiming that NTUC mislabeled the pork as halal. So one of the ways you can actually do to check that whether this is accurate or not is to actually just do a Google reverse image search to check. And my next video will tell you how to do this process. So as you can see, if you see a new image that says, oh, this is something that is being done, maybe one of the good ways to find out whether it's recycled hoax or not is to actually just Google reverse image search. It will just show you whether this image has appeared in the past before. So maybe if, like, let's say the before topic about the mislabeling of the pork as halal, actually if you actually bother to go and reverse image search a thing, you can actually find that it has actually happened a couple of times before. So this is one of the ways you can use Google reverse image search to check whether an image is actually authentic or not. Okay, finally, I'll talk about countering fake news by acting against it. So why is this important? Okay, so it's important because it alerts other readers and allows false information to be debunked. And we also find that when people are asked to fact check, spot inconsistencies and correct them, actually the influence of fake news on them is actually quite reduced. And definitely, we can always do more than to just ignore fake news when we see it. We have seen that people will want to ignore it, but actually we can do a lot more than that. We see that actually people are quite willing to stop the spread of fake news. However, we see that actually in our cases, we don't really see people being really aware of who to report fake news to. A lot of people say they're not sure. There's a couple of ways you can do this. Online, let's say if you encounter a fake piece of news on Facebook, there's a reporting function where you can say, okay, you can flag it as a fake news story. Or let's say if you are on WhatsApp, then you see a random number that you never know before, then they start telling you stuff. You can actually block them if you want to. So these are the ways you can actually protect yourself online by flagging all these kind of fake news. Okay, so this is a summary. These are 4 things I've talked about. And I'd like to leave you all with two take-home messages. Number 1 is anyone can spot and avoid falling prey to fake news. And number 2 is we can all play a part in fighting fake news. And so a bit of koyok for my organization. We are on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much once again. Can you all please give a big round of applause for Ms. Grace Yeoh from Rice Media, Mr. Ken Chen from the Home Team Behavioral Science team.